That's better. There are some things that you can't say in advertising for your dental practice. Truthful advertising is, of course, a requirement for businesses of any kind. But dental practices are held to an even higher standard, and there can be serious repercussions for violating those standards. So, let's jump in and talk about 8 things that you cannot say in advertising for your dental practice. And hang on until the end of the video because I'm going to give you some bonus content on patient testimonials and whether or not you can compensate patients for those testimonials, and if so, how to do it. So stay tuned until the end of the video for that bonus content. Hey Tooth Nation, I'm the Orth Attorney Trey Lawrence. I've been in the practice of law for over 20 years and I'm General Counsel for the American Association of Orthodontists. The Orth Attorney brings you important legal information for your dental or orthodontic practice that is relevant, essential, and hopefully at least mildly entertaining. If you find the information in this video helpful, please find me and follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Orth Attorney. We come out with content almost daily with information on topics just like this for your dental or orthodontic practice. And the standard legal blah 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 stuff that I have to say, the information presented by the Orth Attorney is not intended to convey legal advice. It is not intended to constitute an advertisement for legal services, and the Orth Attorney strongly recommends that you consult with an attorney that's licensed in your state or jurisdiction before taking any action that could result in legal liability for you or your practice. So, everyone knows that advertisements for any kind of business have to be truthful, no duh. But the standard is a little different and a little higher for dental, orthodontic, other dental specialty practices. Now, granted, most practices are not going to intentionally try to pull the wool over a patient's eye or try to intentionally deceive patients in their advertising. But some of these things can be a little tricky if you're not aware of them. So let's jump in and talk about 8 things that you can't say in advertising for your dental or orthodontic practice, how to avoid them, how to be able to advertise without worrying about legal liability. Let's jump in. First thing that you cannot say in advertising for your dental practice is factually inaccurate information. Now again, I know that seems like a no-brainer that applies to businesses in general, obviously, but as we said, the standard is a little higher for dental practices specifically. And the reason for that is because dental boards have determined, and accurately so, that members of the public place a higher level of trust in dental practices because of the education and specialized experience that the doctors who work in those practices have. Dental boards want to make sure that the public is protected, and that's why they have an even higher standard of truthfulness for the information shared by dental practices. Now, throughout this video, I'm going to be talking about the Texas State Dental Board rules as an example because with respect to advertising, the Texas rules are very comprehensive and they're also very typical of the kinds of provisions that are in other states' dental board rules as well. So we're going to be using Texas as a model example. Please, for your individual state, if something that I talk about in this video catches your attention or applies to your advertising, check with your state's dental board regulations. They may be slightly different than Texas. We're just looking at Texas because Texas is a good model example of typical regulations. The Texas Dental Board rules say, professionals have a duty to be honest and trustworthy in their dealings with people. The dentist's primary obligations include respecting the position of trust inherent in the dentist-patient relationship, communicating truthfully and without deception, and maintaining intellectual integrity. In order to properly serve the public, dentists should represent themselves in a manner that contributes to the esteem of the profession. So, as a result of the higher standard that dental boards hold dental practices to in education, you need to make sure that anything you say in advertising is supported by factual evidence. Facts that are verifiable, that are quantifiable, that you can point to the source of those facts so that if you're ever challenged on an advertisement, you can point to an exact fact and where it came from to defend the truthfulness of that statement. The second type of statement that you should not make in your dental practice advertising are comparative claims about your doctor or the practice. So what are comparative claims? Comparative claims are anything where you're comparing, obviously, your doctor or your practice to other doctors, other practices. And they use typically the words like best, most, or better than. Those superlative words. Best, the best dentist in town. Most, the most skilled dentist. the most qualified dentist, or better than. Our practice is better than, our treatment is better than others because. Those kinds of comparisons draw particular attention of state dental boards. What are the facts that you are going to use to demonstrate conclusively that your dentist is the best dentist in town, that your dentist is the most skilled in town, or that your practice is better than another practice? It's very difficult to come up with specific facts that conclusively prove those kinds of statements. Let's look again at the Texas rules and what they say on this. The Texas rules say, additional examples of advertisements that may be false, misleading, deceptive, or not readily subject to verification include but are not limited to implying or suggesting superiority of performance of professional services. So, what you can say as far as comparative claims, if you have specific factual information to support something like, I'll give you an example, Invisalign. Align puts out statistics on the number of cases, so if you want to say that your practice treats more patients with Invisalign than anybody else in town, if you have the factual information, which you might, to verify that, then that kind of a comparative claim would be okay. But it's that kind of very specific, quantifiable information that's going to be required to justify one of those comparative claims, and if you don't have that kind of hard evidence, then the rule is probably going to dictate that you can't make those comparative claims. The third type of statement that you should not make in advertising for your dental practice are comparative claims. Much like for the doctor of the practice, it's comparative claims for treatment methods, materials, or appliances that are used by your practice. So everything we just talked about with doctors and the practice itself also applies to comparative claims about those three things as well, because again, it's going to be very difficult to come up with specific evidence, factual evidence, that conclusively shows that a treatment method, a material, a product, an appliance that your practice uses is the best, the most of something, or better than others. Dental boards are going to want that evidence. It's going to be very hard to find it. That's why you should stay very careful about those kind of comparative claims about treatment methods, materials, and appliances as well. So again, let's look at the Texas rules and what they say on this. The rule says, additional examples of advertisements that may be false, misleading, blah, 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 include but are not limited to implying or suggesting superiority of materials or performance of professional services. But that comparative rule specifically includes materials, which I would also add includes things like treatment methods, appliances, anything else that your practice uses. So be careful of those kind of comparative claims as well in your advertising. The fourth type of statement that you should be very careful about in your practice advertising is any statement that creates an unjustified expectation in patients. Now, it may well be that the treatment that your practice provides is life-changing in many respects. Certainly, let's look at cosmetic differences. It is well known, obviously, that patients who receive certain types of dental treatment experience profound increases in self-confidence, in self-esteem, and other benefits and aspects of their life through things like orthodontic treatment, veneers, other cosmetic dentistry. No question that all has a profound impact on patients' lives. But you want to be very careful by using something like that to then have a patient that's saying things like, since they received treatment at your practice, they've been making bank or stacking loot, or they can't hardly keep members of the opposite sex off of them, or anything else like that, that it's going to be very difficult to replicate that for other patients. That kind of advertising, those kind of statements by patients could create unjustified expectations in other patients that you can't guarantee to those other patients. So let's look at what the Texas rules say on this. The rule says, additional examples of advertisements that may be false, misleading, blah, 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 include but are not limited to communicating an implication, prediction, or suggestion of any guarantee of future satisfaction or success of a dental service, or otherwise creating unjustified expectations concerning the potential result of dental treatment. So the rule specifically says don't create unjustified expectations about the result of a particular dental treatment. Be careful about advertising statements that could create an unjustified expectation in patients. The fifth type of statement that you should not make in your dental practice advertising are guarantees of painless or pain-free dental treatment. Now, it may well be the case that your practice specializes in utilizing certain methods or certain practices to minimize or greatly reduce the amount of pain experienced by patients. So light or heavy sedation, sleep dentistry, other types of anesthesia, other treatment techniques and methods, you may very well do those, and they may very well bring down the level of pain experienced by patients in many cases. So it is perfectly acceptable to advertise that you do those things and that you attempt to reduce the amount of pain experienced by patients. But what you can't do is you cannot guarantee a painless or pain-free treatment or other language along those lines. This is another one that the dental board rules often specifically address. Let's look at the Texas rule. The rule says additional examples of advertisements that may be false, misleading, blah, 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 include but are not limited to claiming to provide or perform dental work without pain or discomfort to the patient. So you can advertise your specific methods, you can advertise that you try to bring the patient's pain experience down. You cannot guarantee or say that you will provide painless or pain-free treatment. The sixth type of statement that you cannot say in your dental practice advertising, or if you do say it, you need to be very careful that you actually meet the requirements for it, and that is a claim of specialization in a particular dental specialty, or that your doctor is a specialist in that area. Nearly every state, if not every state, has rules specifically on specialty advertising for dental practices. The Texas rule provides a good example of what those types of requirements typically include, so let's look at the Texas rule again. And the rule says, a dentist who wishes to advertise as a specialist or a multiple specialist in one or more specialty areas shall meet the criteria in one or more of the following categories. And then it goes on to list categories, but the gist of it is what's very common for other states as well. The gist is advertised as a specialist or specializing in an area that the doctor, the dentist, must have graduated from a CODA accredited program, postdoctoral program, in one of the specialty areas that's recognized by the ADA. So as you know, the ADA has, I don't remember the number because it changes all the time. I think it's 12 or maybe 13, but message me, comment below if I'm wrong on that number. It's always changing. But the ADA has listed out the dental specialties. So if you want to claim to be a specialist or specializing in one of those areas, your dentist must have graduated from a postdoctoral program. It's accredited by CODA in one of those areas. If they have, then advertising as a specialist or specializing in those areas or that area is totally fine. If they haven't, then they cannot do that. So here's what you can do. If your dentist has not graduated from a postdoctoral program in one of those areas, you can advertise that you offer particular services. So let's take orthodontic treatment. If you're a general dental practice, you do offer orthodontic treatment, you can absolutely advertise that you offer orthodontic treatment, that you offer Invisalign, however you want to phrase it. What you cannot advertise as is that your doctor is an orthodontist or specializes in orthodontic treatment, unless they meet those criteria that I mentioned a second ago. And that's just orthodontics. That of course applies to perio, endo, any other dental specialty as well. Just be very careful, know your state's regulations on specialty advertising if you intend to advertise in that way, and make sure that your dentist meets those requirements before you do that. The seventh statement that you cannot make in your advertising is unreasonably preying on patients' fears and anxiety. So it is 100% acceptable to advertise the negative consequences of not receiving dental treatment. For instance, as long as you have the evidence, it's perfectly acceptable to advertise, for example, that children who do not receive sealants on their teeth are X percentage more likely to experience cavities in those teeth. That's totally acceptable. But what you can't do is more on the extreme of, there was a case a while back that led to dental boards adopting this kind of rule in many instances, where there was a dental practice that was using pictures of people whose teeth had completely fallen out in their advertising, clearly preying on patients' fear about their own teeth falling out. And so as a result of that, dental boards put in place rules that say you cannot unreasonably prey on fears and anxiety. And the Texas board rule, again, is a good example of that. The Texas rule says additional examples of advertising that may be false, misleading, blah, 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 include but are not limited to appealing to an individual's anxiety in an excessive or unfair way. So, Don't take advantage of their fears and anxiety. The problem is, as you probably know, many patients have a very high level of fear and anxiety about dentistry and dental treatments to begin with, so you cannot unreasonably prey on that in your advertising. So make sure you look at your advertising through that lens as well, and that you're not saying anything that could potentially fall under that. And the 8th type of statement that you should not make in your practice advertising is using patient testimonials to say anything that you couldn't otherwise say directly in your advertising. So sometimes practices try to be cute and they think, well, we can't say this directly, but we'll just have one of our patients say it and then we'll be okay. Here's the problem. If you solicited that statement from the patient, if you asked the patient to provide a testimonial or to write an online review, and then you use it in your advertising, then the dental board is going to hold you responsible for what the patient said, just as if your practice had actually said it. The key there being that you solicited that statement from the patient. Now obviously you can't control what patients off on their own in social media say, but if you're soliciting patients, if you're asking them to provide testimonials or positive reviews online, then the dental board is going to hold you responsible. So don't try to be cute. Don't try to get around all of these rules that we're talking about by just asking patients to say what you would have said, because if you're asking the patients in the first place, then the dental board's going to hold you equally responsible, just as if your practice said it directly. And finally, bonus content on giving patients some kind of compensation, a gift, an amount or a percentage off of their treatment costs or something like that, in exchange for providing you with a patient testimonial or writing a patient online review for your practice. I get questions all the time about whether practices can do that. And the answer is yes, you can, but you need to know that you need to disclose the fact that the patients were compensated for providing that testimonial or that online review in any advertising where you use the patient statement. So it doesn't have to be large, bold font at the top of the page. It doesn't have to take up, some significant portion of the advertisement. It can absolutely be the little fine print down at the bottom of the screen, down at the bottom of the advertisement or the web page or the video, wherever you use it. The little small fine print is fine, but the disclosure has to be there saying that the patient was compensated for the testimonial. The reason is because not only are state dental boards very interested in this topic, but the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, also has a strong interest in across the board in business, patients or customers being compensated for endorsements, and they very strongly want for those to be disclosed by the business that uses them. So they will look at these things. They will come after a dental practice or another healthcare practice just like they would any other business. The good news is the FTC has put out some guidance on this topic. It's not completely unintelligible legalese. It is halfway understandable. It's not like reading a comic book, but it's still understandable. I will put a link to that resource in the description of this video. If you're going to use patient testimonials, online reviews that patients wrote, and you've given them something to do that, then you need to look at this resource and make sure that you're familiar with it before you do your advertising. So 8 things that you can't say in your practice advertising. The good news is, absolutely go for it. Do your advertising, do your social media marketing, whatever you need to do. Just be aware of the areas that you can't get into and the things you can't say. Stay away from them or make sure you otherwise comply with the law, and then you're in good shape and you can do all of that and not have to worry about legal liability or some criminal penalty or all the other bad things that can happen if you don't follow the law. So I'm the Orth Attorney, Trey Lawrence. If you found this information helpful, please hit the like button below. Hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell so that you get notification every time a video with topics on legal information just like this comes out, at least weekly, if not more often. If you found this information helpful, please find me on Instagram and TikTok. Follow me there so that you can get information on an almost daily basis similar to this kind of information. And until next time, Tooth Nation, be good, stay out of legal trouble because being sued bites. Catch you next time.